Next, from Springfield, a special story of service and sacrifice. Chicagoan Dick Lockhart recounts experiences in World War II as a member of the Army's 106th Division. In December of 1944, during the German counteroffensive known as the Battle of the Bulge, Dick Lockhart was taken prisoner and spent 4 months as a prisoner of war. This runs about 30 minutes.
Dick Lockhart, thank you so much for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Glad to be with you again, Terry.
We have touched on your story a bit in a previous interview, but I wanted to spend a little more time about it. We're going to spend about a half an hour recounting specifically 4 key months out of your life's history and what happened to you actually as a soldier during World War II when you were fighting on the European theater and were engaged in the Western Front.
Battle of the Bulge, known in those days, right?
Exactly. Captured and then spent 4 months as a prisoner of war in Germany. So with that as kind of an overview, let's just start going back to December 1944. Let's pick up the story there. The Americans had landed in June in Normandy and pushed the Germans back almost to the German border.
That's right.
You got to the European theater at what time?
I got to the European theater there. First we were brought to Great Britain, England. That would be in October. And
October of 44.
In October of 44, right. Actually on the Queen Elizabeth, the original Queen Elizabeth, luxury liner of the world, along with 18,000 other men, by the way. Kind of crowded. And so then that was the first trip basically to Europe that I took, and interestingly enough, the ship went to outside Glasgow, Scotland. Scotland is my ancestral home, you might say, of the Lockharts. So then they took us by train to southern England, and we waited there basically until toward the end of November, I would say. We had to wait for the rest of the division to come across.
And that was the 106th?
106th Infantry Division, yes. Our regiment got to Europe early, so then we had to wait for the other 2 regiments to join us.
By the way, how many people are roughly in a division?
13,000 plus, between 13 and 14,000, at least in the World War II division. I don't know about the divisions of today. I think they've been restructured. All
right, so it's October. The rest of the people, or you form your division, and then what time do they actually send you over to France?
It would be in November, and then they trucked us across northern France into Luxembourg and into Belgium and across the border into Germany. That's where our first run at the front line was then.
I'm sorry, actually into Germany?
Into Germany, just across the front lines from Belgium. So, and it was a quiet front. Now we're in the middle of winter, obviously.
See, I didn't realize that actually the Allied lines had pierced Germany.
But just barely, shall we say. And the town is still there. I've been back a couple times since the end of the war, of course. It's called Blyalf, Germany. It was completely destroyed, of course. It's been rebuilt. So that was the first place that we were brought to as a quiet sector of the Western Front at that time.
And so, I'm sorry, so you were barely in Germany, but corresponding to, were you next to Belgium or more in France?
Belgium.
Okay.
Belgium.
So kind of on
the fact is the division headquarters was in a town called St. Vith, Belgium.
V-I-T-H.
V-I-T-H, right. It's a few miles. The borders were all kind of close. Luxembourg was close. Belgium, France, and Germany are all kind of conjoined in that particular area, called the Ardennes.
Okay, the Ardennes Forest area.
Mm-hmm. The fact is, the Battle of the Bulge in Europe is called the Battle of the Ardennes. They wouldn't know it by the Battle of the Bulge.
Is that right? So, and another key part of this, I think, is the 106th Division was a green division. I mean, you had not seen any combat, as you just said. You didn't get a line until...
Well, a lot of the men who had joined the division had only joined it in the States, maybe 3 months before, and came from other units, or they were not necessarily infantrymen. I joined the division. I was an infantry volunteer. I didn't want to miss any excitement. Worked out that way, as a matter of fact. And I joined the division in May of '44, and they were at Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And I grew up in Indiana, so it was compatible.
You grew up in Fort Wayne, is that right?
Fort Wayne, yes. I got home weekends anyway when I was there. But we shipped out in October, and like I say, there were any number of men in our company. We were the Regimental Anti-Tank Company, who had just joined the division. It had come from some other unit, anti-aircraft or some other entity, and were not really familiar with combat activities, basically.
Now, within a division, there's different regiments, and you were a member of 423rd
Yes.
Anti-Tank Company, or regiment, and in the Anti-Tank Company.
There's 3 battalions, 3 infantry battalions in every infantry regiment, 3 regiments in every division those days. And in each company, excuse me, in each regiment there was 1 anti-tank company. The problem is the anti-tank company was given a weapon which was incapable of destroying any German tanks to speak of. It was a 57 millimeter gun, and we got inadequate training on it, and we never trained with a moving target, for example. We're down in southern Indiana in Camp Atterbury. Camp Atterbury is still there, but it's a different kind of place now. So we're kind of deficient, shall we say, in weaponry, deficient in training and experience. But in any case, we were all gung-ho, and we figured the war was be over pretty soon. The Germans were on their last pose, so to speak.
And that's, you're getting right to where I wanted to go, to set the stage of then what happens. The attitude at the time, when you got to the line, some people were thinking the war might be over by Christmas, because in World War I, the Germans gave up prior to the lines moving into Germany. And here, as you say, you were already on Germany's door.
Yes, and you got to remember that the Germans were fighting the Russians on the Eastern Front, and they also had troops in Italy. That war was still going on. So it was inconceivable for most of us, I guess, that the Germans were going to be able in any kind of put together any kind of a force. It was going to be a threatening kind of force. So it was we looked, shall we say, to the it wouldn't be over by Christmas. I don't think anybody believed that, but they thought it would be over relatively soon.
Victory, at least, was in the air, huh?
It was definitely in the air, because the Russians were moving rapidly toward Berlin, and we were adding troops all the time to the Western Front. So we just figured we'd overwhelm the remaining Germans. Of course, it didn't work out that way.
So then let's pick up the story. Where were you on about the evening of December the 15th, 1944?
Well, I was in this town of Blyolf. We had set up a place where we could sleep in an abandoned house. The 57 millimeter gun was not far away, out in the field. And so we were told that this is an easy place, just take it easy and keep your eyes open, and we don't expect anything to happen until the weather got a little more into spring, shall we say, and then there would be a final push.
In fact, wasn't the 106th located where it was because you were green, and they thought this would be a quiet place where these guys who have not seen combat would be out of harm's way, right?
Get into condition, shall we say. And then 5:30 in the morning on the 16th of December, that's when all hell broke loose, so to speak, from the German side, and they subjected to intense artillery fire, and then the German infantry came. We pretty much fought off the infantry, shall we say, that first day. And
were you actually sleeping yet when the artillery fire came?
I'd just gotten off of guard duty, as a matter of fact, and so then the attack, like I say, came, and it was a long time before I got any decent sleep again.
What was the lay of the land? Is this farmland? It's
hilly, forested, some farmland in between, but heavily forested. Small little hamlets, you might say, scattered around, which is still the case today. It's a very nice, appealing kind of area, but I've got to remember at that time it was bitter cold, lots of snow. We didn't quite know where we're at. We didn't know. We hadn't gotten ourselves, what I want to say, in position to know what big city is far away. Or
kind of acclimated to that area.
Yeah, it was just a strange. We weren't there long enough to get acclimated to the situation before the attack came.
And how did the German soldiers just were they coming out of the forest across the field, or were they dressed in white snowsuits?
No, I didn't see any of that. No, they were in regular gray uniforms.
And you stopped, you say, at least the initial wave?
Well, yes, we pretty much fought off all them during the day with rifle and machine gun fire. There was no tanks to shoot at. And the other thing I should say, I was the anti-tank gunner, so I don't even have a rifle. I have a .45 caliber pistol. But there was some rifles around and there was a machine gun. So we did that pretty much all day, and then toward the end of the day we got orders to withdraw. And so then began several days of hit and run tactics, you might say. Pull back, and we never knew where we were, I might add. Of course, I'm Private First Class Lockhart. Nobody's going to give me any information, and I don't get to make any decisions. I'm just told what to do, and I'm expected to do it. So it was, like I say, it was a running fight after that until the evening of the 19th. And by that time, of course, we had lost a lot of people, and we had not been fed, had not been resupplied with ammunition or anything.
Now, when you said you hadn't been fed, did you have anything on you? Was there nothing to eat, or were you eating just off your supplies?
Pretty much off supplies and what we could scrounge, shall we say, what we could scrounge.
So on we get to the 19th, and the fighting, if you say you lost a number of people, the fighting had been pretty intense over several days.
Yes, but it had been kind of sporadic. I often, I've studied the battle. The decision was made when the attack came. First place, the upper echelons of the American Army didn't believe it was fighting of this intensity. They thought we're Green Division, we're just exaggerating the circumstances and the conditions.
Reports that they were getting.
And then, of course, the Germans moved very rapidly. They had some armored divisions, and they were what I call slicing and dicing. And so the orders was given to basically hold position. It would have been so much better if they'd been asked to, all the regiments had been asked to withdraw to St. Vith and kind of made it into another Bastogne. It would have been this. But we all left out in the woods, you might say, and groups were surrounded. I call it a slicing and dicing operation, basically. And in the evening of the 19th of December, the regimental commander, the colonel, had, I guess, received some kind of demand by the Germans to surrender, and told that, we have you surrounded, we have batteries of 88s, we're going to apparently pound you into submission here. And the colonel, in my opinion, mistakenly, although I'm alive today, so I shouldn't complain, but I think he gave up sooner than he should have. But PFC Lockhart doesn't make those decisions.
So then you're a prisoner of war. How does that happen at the moment? I mean, do all of a sudden, you
told
wave
to
the white flag?
destroy our weapons and come forward, shall we say, destroy your weapons.
So it's almost as if you're marching in a parade toward the German lines?
Yes,
I mean,
although
in a
things
formation.
were kind of chaotic. Things were kind of chaotic. There was not firm lines. Everything was in flux, you understand. But at least to go forward where we all kind of assembled, you might say, and then the Germans made sure we're not carrying any weapons. They asked us to give up our money. I did not give up my money. I hid it in the lining of my jacket. And I was looking for an opportunity to escape if at all possible, but I didn't know where I was. That's part of the problem, being a lowly PFC. And the weather was bitter, cold. And I had...
Was this like 20 degrees or below that?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who cares?
What did you have winter clothing?
I had an overcoat. Yes, I had overcoat. What we did not have, unfortunately, all those troops were good, but it indicates apparently they didn't think it was necessary for us. We did not have any winter footwear. No, what was called snowpacks. It was an insulated boot that most all infantrymen men had in that part of Europe during the wintertime, but we did not get issued any of that. So we just had regular boots which were not sufficiently strengthened to withstand cold and rainy snow. But anyway, that's another problem. Then they marched us, started marching us out.
And they eventually put you on rail cars to take you into Germany.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, there's a book, as you know, Dick, written about some of these experiences. The book is called Given Up for Dead. It was written by Flint Whitlock, America GIs in the Nazi concentration camp at Berga. Now, you were not at
No.
Berga, but some of those were transferred there. But one of the people who were captured, William Shapiro, reading from the book, said the experiences on the trains themselves were horrific.
Yes, right.
And that you spent there for a number of days.
4 days, 4 nights.
In fact, here's a comment from you in the book, said they marched us for about 2 days until we got to the town, was it of Gerolstein?
Gerolstein.
We were held for a day or two waiting for the trains to come and then loaded in the boxcars. About 65 or 70 men to a boxcar, so everybody could not sit down at the same time. Jumping ahead, William Shapiro says, he remembered that latrine facilities on the boxcar were horrendous and appalling. 2 simple boxes placed somewhere in the middle of the car. It added to the chaos among the men when someone had to defecate. So that it said the foul smells in the cars quickly became the least of the POW's concerns. The trouble in part came from American forces, American fighter pilots. Is that right?
Bombing, I don't know whether British or American, but we were bombed in someplace in Germany, but this time.
As you're riding toward Germany to the prison camp.
Yes, right. And we didn't know where we were, and there's no windows, and there's no conductors telling us where the next stop was or anything of that nature.
It says in the book the Allies had mastery of the air at 1,000 feet or so, traveling 400 miles an hour. A pilot can't tell if a freight train is full of goods, ammunition, or German troops. And as a result, many prisoners of war died tragically at the unknowing hands of their countrymen.
That's correct.
So after...
Fortunately, the boxcar that I was in was not hit. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today, Terry.
It must have been horrific.
Yeah,
I can't imagine not only the conditions, but the terror that you felt just not knowing if at any moment you were going to be hit.
Yeah. And you hear the bombs whistling. It seems like they're whistling down on top of you, and it takes maybe seems like it takes 5 to 10 minutes to detonate, but it probably doesn't take that long. But it's a difficult kind of thing, but you're completely helpless.
So you get to the place where then you're held in captivity, and that is Bad Orb.
Bad Orb, Germany, right.
And it says here in German the word means bath and orb spa, so it literally means bath spa, but the GIs thought it meant bad omen.
Well, we knew it was bad because it said so right on the railroad station.
This is not a good thing. And one of tell us about what happened then. You are taken off the trains. What experiences first you? How did the German guards treat you? I mean, throughout this time, where of course on one time you're on the boxcars, but as you got to the camp.
At this point in time, there was no contact basically, and like I say, nobody knew where they were. Basically, we were disoriented. And we knew we were in Germany, but we didn't know where in Germany. We were on the trains for 4 days and 4 nights. A lot of times, of course, the train was just stopped on the tracks, and maybe the tracks up ahead had been destroyed. They had to repair them, and so we had no idea where we were.
And the other thing is, as you said earlier, during the fighting, you hadn't been eating well. You
That's right.
You weren't fed while you were on the boxcars.
No.
So now it's been close to a week, I guess, between the fighting and the traveling.
Yeah. Some of us may have had some food. I had what is called the D bar, which is a heavily loaded chocolate bar, which all troops are given as a last resort to consume something that might provide some energy. So I had managed to keep that throughout, basically. But yes, it's hunger was a problem. Also, even thirst. First thing we did when we got off the train is start eating snow to provide some kind of hydration.
Because they'd not given you any water.
No.
Then when you get to the camp, reading again from the book, Jack Crawford, did you know Jack?
No.
It says once we got to the camp, they had all these old pots lying around. We used them to get some grass soup.
Right.
So food was a major issue throughout your captivity, right?
It's an obsession.
I'm sorry?
It was an obsession. It takes over all other thoughts in your head.
Let me just read one part, and I want to get back to that. It's, James Smith says, when we got to Bad Orb, the kitchen was being run by the Russians. They served us a meal of carrots, all kinds of mixed vegetables, beets, carrots, and cabbage, I'm sorry.
No,
he
you're
writes,
right.
Well, it's about like that. He writes, I thought this the worst meal I've ever had. Later I found out it was one of the best I was ever.
Yeah.
What happened after that? As far as the food
well,
supplies?
they replaced the Russian kitchen. Now, there were prisoners already in this camp, and there were French and Russian and Serbians that I recall, and all in a different compound within the camp itself. And they didn't allow any intermixing to speak of if they could avoid it. So we did get, we were assigned some broken down barracks where we slept on the floor, basically. And then we did get control of the kitchen from the Russians. Not that we got anything better food or not, but we just got, you know.
Well, the problem was you didn't have any supplies to cook with. I mean, you didn't have food to cook with, basically.
No, we didn't have any food, but of course, we're in the prison camp, so the food is controlled by the German authorities there. And just like they provided the guards, and then they pretty much left alone to run our own operation.
Well, when we hear grass soup, is it just what we think? I mean, what is grass soup?
I always thought it was mostly turnip tops, to tell the truth. Once in a while, you get a small, very small bit of horse meat, which tasted delicious. It was always well sought for. But it was awful kind of stuff. Everybody soon got diarrhea. And by the way, there's no toilet paper, there's no, it's all convenient toilet facilities in the camp. It's a primitive place.
And the other thing is, during the entire time you were held in captivity, which was roughly 4 months, you never had a change of clothes.
Never had a change of same clothes put on in November, basically, till April. Lice infested, that was the other big problem in the camp. When the weather got a little bit warmer, then we were infested with lice and could not get rid of it. It gets in the lining of your clothes, it gets in your hair. By the way, there's no barber shops in Stalag 9B. So we were, that was a big problem, food and lice infestation.
What was the, what were the barracks themselves like? What, did you have a bed? Did you have, you know, a lot of us, the images we have, and we know Hogan's Heroes is a comedy, but on the other hand, we had the movie The Great Escape. And there, you know, people are going around in relatively clean clothing, and they look well fed, and you know.
It's a movie, right?
It's a movie.
We didn't have any of that. First, we slept on the floors, and then they put us into another building where there were, I think, 3 tiers of wooden bunks, no mattress. They give us 1 blanket per person, and there was no heat, shall we say, in the place.
Just the body heat of the
I guess,
soldiers themselves.
Right.
Now, frostbite became an issue among some of us.
It became a problem because I've been tramping around in Germany before capture, and my feet had gotten thoroughly wet because, like I say, we didn't have the proper footwear. And then, at least in those, before capture, you could walk around. But once I got in the boxcar, I sat there for 4 days and 4 nights in intense cold with wet socks and wet shoes and nothing to change to. That's where the problems started to begin. And then that never got any better, essentially, except when I got to the camp, you could do some walking around, but you still have only the 1 pair of shoes and 1 pair of socks, and and the cold had penetrated over a period of time. So yes, that's still a troubling problem for me today.
That's what I was going to ask. The cold, was it on your feet?
Yes, right.
One of the other in the book mentions one of the other fellows says his hands had been subject to frostbite. He couldn't hold a glass with ice in it.
Is that right? Well, I don't know what happened. I don't remember that, but I do remember I got some kind of a deficiency in the diet, obviously. I lost a lot of my fingernails, just came out whole, you might say. And it took a while for them to grow back, and you're starting to get jaundice, but and some people had jaundice bad, but liberation came in time enough so that did not progress.
Well, on one hand, we say you were captive for about 4 months, so the listener might go, well, that wasn't so bad, 4 months. But here's a passage, as you said, food was all an obsession. And
that's all you thought about.
It says, as their hunger increased, American GIs turned on their fellow countrymen at Stalag 9B, which was where you were held. Joseph Mark said, a guy from my own company called Blackie came up to me one day and asked if he could borrow some bread. I said, I don't lend bread. He threatened me and said, I'm going to tell them that you're a Jew. Noting the human body needs a minimum of 1,700 calories a day just to survive, Mark said, the Germans had this technique that they used at concentration camps of feeding you a diet of 1,000 or 1,100 calories a day, and if you worked, you died. You didn't die of starvation, you died of some illness, diphtheria, dysentery, or something else. Mm-hmm. Did you see, were fellow GIs dying during this 4 months?
Oh, yes. Probably died every day, essentially, right? Once you got kind of sick, they separated you out and put you in a separate barracks. And I think deaths occurred among that group now. There were a few men who just gave up, shall we say, and did not try to save themselves. They
just lost that will to live.
Just lost the will to live, exactly. And that was unfortunate. And it was, I don't know what to say. It's a unique experience, I guess, obviously. I did have the unfortunate situation of being beaten by a German guard, along with 2 other GIs. And I just want to mention that briefly because it has an interest all of its own. We were on a wood sawing detail out deep in the woods outside camp. And there must have been 15 or so. The object is to cut some wood to take back to the camp.
And didn't they promise you you'd get more rations?
Yes, they were promised extra rations. First place, we never got the extra rations, but we got a beating instead. And I was the first one that was hit across the back. And I thought I would always survive the combat. When the German guard hit me with this club, or actually a big limb of the tree, I thought he went berserk. And he went, if you're going to hit me in the head, that would be the end. I would still be in the woods. You would have somebody else sitting across from today. But fortunately, he hit me a few more times, but all across the back, and then he took after 2 other GIs. No words was spoken. No words were spoken.
And that was because you weren't working fast enough?
We assumed that. We assumed that because we all started sawing wood faster after that. And I more or less dismissed it as one of those events that I remembered, but nobody else would know about. Then I was trying to get some records from the National Archives, because the Germans took pictures of each individual prisoner with the number, just like you would if you were arrested by the local police department. And I've been trying for a number of years to get that picture that was taken of me. It'd probably be in January of 1945. The National Archives has a lot of materials there about World War II and so forth. So I asked Senator Durbin, who I've known since he was parliamentarian of the Senate back in the 70s when I first met him. I asked him to see whether he could get out of the archives this photographic record that might be there. And the archives wrote back to Senator Durbin and say, no, we could not find that particular documents, but we did find something in the records here of prisoner abuse, including one of Richard Lockhart. And it sat, and what happened? It's interesting. A lot of people should pursue the National Archives. They got some questions because they have a lot of material. But what happened after the war, the non-commissioned officers, of course they separated out, by the way, the officers and the non-commissioned officers to other camps, better camps than the one for the privates and PFCs. But the non-commissioned officers were for a while in 9B, and they heard about the beatings that I took and 2 other GIs took. And at the end of the war, they were interviewed whether they knew any instances of prisoner abuse. And gave an account, what they have heard about what happened to myself and to the 2 other GIs. And it had been in the National Archives since early 1945. Senator Durbin was, through his intercession with the people at the National Archives, discovered this in 1990. So it sat there
45 years.
45 years. Here I thought nobody would ever know about that particular incident. It was a very detailed kind of account done by 2 different non-commissioned officers who reported to the War Crimes Committee or Commission or whatever it was that this abuse did take place.
When you came back, did it change, did it alter the course of your life, or was it more that you just wanted to pick up the pieces?
Well, that's a good question. I guess in a way I feel that if I survive that, I can survive anything. Because now it's different, what I want to say, different kinds of circumstances. I'm a lobbyist, long-time lobbyist over in the Capitol building, as you know. So it's made me realize that maybe I have some inner strengths because I never gave up. And I figured out a way to survive, and I was also very lucky. So yes, I'm aware of the fact that I've led a interesting and fortunate, and have had a fortunate life.
Well, Dick Lockhart, I appreciate you so much taking the time to share some of your experiences with us. I know we could have talked further at length, and maybe we can do that again at some time in the future.
Anytime.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.